Hi guys, welcome to the Revive Stronger podcast. I'm your host as always, Steve Hall, and today I am joined by Jordan Peters. I think the majority of our audience will really know who Jordan is. He is kind of like the big bodybuilder over in the UK, for lack of a better kind of description of Jordan. But to give you a bit of background, he is obviously a competitive bodybuilder. If you can't see, he is huge behind the camera. Very, very big guy. He has a master's in physiology. He's also a very experienced coach. If anyone's followed Jordan, you've probably seen all the different clients that he's helped. But he's even worked with people from the GB shot putters, Premiership rugby players, professional strongmen, world champion powerlifters, and of course, bodybuilders, which is kind of your bread and butter, right, Jordan?
It is, buddy. My preference is working with bodybuilders. I would say that's where I'm most competent. I now tend to kind of actually send inquiries on elsewhere when I get them kind of from rugby field. I will then send them elsewhere, and the same for strongman. I send them elsewhere, mostly because as my time becomes more limited, I know that I'm more of a specialist bodybuilding coach, so that's probably where I need to be focusing my attention.
I can see that you kind of become, you don't want to be a jack of all trades, you want to become specialist in that niche area, and
Sure.
You're doing an incredibly good job of that.
Thank you, buddy.
And actually something I wanted to kick off with, because I've heard a lot of your content and I follow you, and something I think you would be incredibly great to talk to about is just kind of why you're so passionate about bodybuilding. Kind of what led you to the sport? Why do you love it to this day? What are the things that kind of drive you and kind of drive you to be a coach still?
That's an interesting question. Bodybuilding is more where my passion has been directed, because I'm passionate about progress. That's actually what I'm passionate about. And I'm passionate about helping people as well. So then that was always going to manifest itself in one direction or another. And it just so happened to end up being bodybuilding, I think. Because I used to be a fairly decent rugby player, and then I didn't have my professional contract renewed. And at that point, all I really knew how to do well was lift weights. So then I thought, okay, well, let's run with this and let's see where this goes. And it was an incredible challenge, and I loved it. And I was like, okay, right, this is something that I really, really want to carry on doing. I don't want to try to move into another sport. I think that this can be something that I'm good at. And then from playing rugby and learning how to communicate with people, how to motivate people, how to always get the best out of an individual, and knowing that it takes tactile approaches in the way that one person might respond to one type of communication and another might respond to another, that then actually enabled me to become a fairly good coach pretty quickly, because I worked out how to basically get people to do what I wanted them to do from a coaching perspective. And then that just snowballed, really. I then went on to do my master's in physiology as I became more passionate about just learning and getting a greater understanding. And then that's kind of led me to where I am now.
And are you still working towards your PhD? I know I've seen that written.
That is certainly a goal. Mm-hmm. It really is. But right now, I would say that kind of my passion has been directed more in a business kind of progress. Obviously, we have the members site that is the largest in the country, and then I have now launched the supplement range, and then we have 15 sponsored athletes now, and that's kind of where my attention is. I think that once I'm done, so to speak, with competitive bodybuilding myself, then that's when I will fully delve back into academia. Because the year that I did my master's, I really actually struggled to be a good bodybuilder that year. Mm-hmm. And that was the only year since I very first competed that I didn't make it on stage. Just because juggling that with trying to compete was just so hard. It was a lot harder than I thought it would be. So I know that if I'm going to commit myself to a PhD, I need to have that as my kind of sole focus.
Yeah, no, I completely respect that. And if you were a client, you're coming to me and you're like, Steve, I'm doing this PhD, but I want to compete in bodybuilding. I'd be like, I think you should be better off waiting. You go kind of brain dead when you become a competitive bodybuilder.
Yeah, it's hard to juggle everything. Like at the moment, even now, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm struggling to juggle my business goals with then my own competitive bodybuilding goals. Right. Because I find myself becoming more. I'm quite an obsessive person. And once as you can probably tell, like it has manifested itself in the bodybuilding. But at the moment now, I'm so intrigued by learning how to grow a business, and that's kind of something that right now has my attention pretty big.
And to give, I guess, the audience, but also myself, a bit of background about kind of where you learn about bodybuilding, kind of to grow muscle, and obviously you've got a huge amount of education on the members site, kind of where did that come from? And before I let you answer, it's just reminded me of the fact the first time I've actually ever met you, or at least saw eyes on you, and you wouldn't have known I was like someone, I don't know, tiny little guy. This was Brad Schoenfeld when he came over to the UK for the first time and presented. I vividly remember the huge guy eating out of Tupperware. So it was obviously Brad has had some influence there.
I enjoyed that seminar. I do remember asking Brad quite a few questions that he didn't have answers to, though. He was like, we've not done research for that yet. We've not done research for that. Because obviously I've been obsessed with understanding the balance between training volume, intensity, and frequency for a very long time. It's something that I've been really, that's why I went to that seminar. And Brad kind of knows his stuff on that, which was kind of cool. But in terms of kind of my knowledge, so I started lifting weights when I was 12. And my very first weights coach was, at the time, the GB weightlifting coach. His name was Keith Morgan, and he coached out of Crystal Palace Weightlifting Centre. And that was the very first introduction for me to lifting a weight ever. It was with a GB coach. And he coached me for 2 years. So that's why I'm a good deadlifter, and I can pull really well with different types of pulls from the floor. That's why like my snatch grip work is pretty good, because I did 2 years of just perfect work with him. We weren't allowed to lift like in any way where our form would break down. So it was just kind of constant repetition of reinforcing perfect form. So I had a really fortunate start to weightlifting, basically. So I knew how to move without even realizing that I knew how to move. Because as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, you don't understand what you're being taught at the time. And it wasn't until I got to the age of 16 where I'd moved from Harlequins to Wasps, where the strength and conditioning coaches were like, who the fuck taught you to deadlift like this? And I was like, well, I've been doing this since I was 12. So I was really lucky. And then whilst I was at Wasps again, I had amazing strength and conditioning coaches. And because I really enjoyed being in the gym, I formed a really close relationship with the strength coaches. And I was just constantly asking them questions. Why have you programmed this on this day? Why is this in this way? Why are we doing this many steps? Why are we doing this many reps? Like, I was the only player that was fascinated by just understanding the programming. Like, none of the other players gave a shit. They just came in, they did what they did, and they left. Whereas I would look at the sheet and I was just like, why are we doing this? I want to know why we're doing this. So I learned a lot there. And then once I was like 17, 18, I then just became obsessed with reading on the internet. Just every forum that I could find that had good information on, I would just read and read and read. There was a particular forum called Intense Muscle that was basically the home of like Dante Trudell, Ken Skip Hill, Dr. Scott Stevenson. And that's where I kind of became introduced to dog crap training, DC style training, which is kind of like a low volume, high frequency, high intensity training style, like training at full body 3 times a week. I'd already been doing that work whilst I was at Wasps. So that's how I'd always ever trained, was basically either upper lower splits or full body splits. But it was only once I started to read DC training that I really, again, fully understood the relationship between volume, intensity, and frequency. And then from there, I obviously went to Loughborough to do undergrad in sport and exercise science. I didn't really, I would say, take anything from that degree that was useful in terms of bodybuilding. Like, Loughborough is an incredible university, but the way that they educate you certainly wasn't geared towards understanding or becoming a better bodybuilder. Like, if I could redo the undergrad again, I think I could take a lot more from it. But I probably wasn't I probably didn't know which career path at that point I was certainly going to go down. Because I did my first bodybuilding show whilst I was in my first year. And that was pretty much unheard of, I think, but everyone thought it was just weird.
Yeah.
Because there was no one else in the whole university that competed at that time. No one had done a show, and no one knew anyone that had done a show. And then there was just me, like, on the cross trainer dieting for my first show. Genuinely, people just thought I was strange as hell. But once I'd done that first show, I was like, okay, I really, really love this. And yeah, that's kind of the backstory as to how I kind of developed the knowledge that I had as a base.
And I guess at least at Loughborough, you also met Corinne there, so it has played a big role in your life.
I met Corinne in the first year, and she wouldn't go on a date with me until the very end of second year and then the start of third year. She just rejected me for like a year and a half straight. But I was persistent. I was like, yes. And then obviously it's our 10-year anniversary this weekend.
Oh, amazing.
So we've been together for 10 years, which is pretty crazy.
Have you got anything special planned for that?
Well, actually, this Sunday, we're the lead sponsor for the British Grand Prix bodybuilding competition. So we have the whole squad of athletes down there for that day.
Oh, amazing.
And Corinne is deep in prep at the moment. So off-plan meals are off. So I think the maximum that we'll do is maybe, I don't know, say happy 10 years. I think that's as good as it gets.
I think those are some of the best relationships, just where the anniversaries aren't the big deal. It's the everyday, and you're supporting her throughout her prep and everything there. So it's been an interesting 10 years, to be honest, because when I first met Corinne, she never even stepped foot in a gym. And then now she's IFBB pro, like world champion powerlifter, like all-time, all-fed British record holder. Like, so what she's capable of is just pretty phenomenal, which is cool. And some of what we've already been touching on, and something I definitely wanted to dig into, and I think the listeners would be disappointed if I didn't, is kind of touching upon some of your philosophies for muscle growth, kind of over your years of training. What are the big things that you're looking at when taking on board a client that you're kind of focused on, whether that be like intensity, volume, technique, these sort of elements?
So I would say, as I've really matured as a trainer, one of the biggest things that has become evident to me when I kind of reflect on my own philosophies is that I've become less and less married to any one type. I would say that that's probably the biggest piece of advice that I can give to maybe a trainer in their infancy, in that you don't want to create any emotional attachment to any one type of training or any exercise or any nutritional regime. That as soon as you start to become your own ideas in that moment, then you're going to find it difficult really to progress, because all of a sudden each time you learn something, you're going to have to break down basically who you are if you've become that thing.
Yeah.
And that can be quite difficult for people. It certainly would have been difficult for the 22, 23-year-old me, who just wouldn't have been able to take on that kind of advice. Whereas now I'm very, very open-minded.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that one of the main things that I'm looking at when I'm coaching people is just making sure that they're working to their own recovery capabilities. That's just and then also being able to manipulate their recovery capabilities to allow them to work at higher capacities than maybe they have previously. And then if we can constantly improve that scenario, we're going to move towards a great physique. So like I'm really fond of the terms that Mike Israetel coined in regards to maximal recoverable volume, minimal effective volume. I think that they're fantastic terms, because I hadn't heard previously to him someone using a phrase to kind of coin what we're meaning there. Like, I've always known what I was capable of doing, and I've always worked very hard to maintain kind of the things that impact my recovery. But I think that that's a fantastic piece of terminology that he's come up with. Have you heard of anyone else that have used those phrases in another way?
No, I think you're right. Mike's been very good at kind of conceptualizing ideas or things that we know are a thing into an actual concept.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of Mike for that. So I always credit him when I use those phrases just because they're great phrases. So if we can have someone constantly working at their maximum capacity, then we're going to make great progress. So that's kind of the only thing that I'm looking to do with clients is understanding what is influencing their recovery capabilities, how can I improve that, and then obviously learning to move and contract muscles efficiently. And that's obviously something that someone's going to initially have trouble with.
Mm-hmm.
And that there's a big difference between moving a weight and contracting a muscle. And again, in my infancy as a trainer, I was obsessed with progressive overload, which I still am. Mm-hmm. But my focus very much would have been just moving a weight from A to B and driving my logbook up, regardless really of any internal stimulus. I never took on board whether an internal stimulus even existed. Mm-hmm. I solely considered the external. And that's certainly going to limit you to a certain point when you aren't efficiently recruiting what you're trying to recruit. Because we're always going to run into issues where certain muscle groups are going to take over and certain muscle groups are going to lag. So then again, that would be certainly something that I'm trying to address with my clients, is just to reinforce finding a balance between internal and external stimulus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's kind of like you said, when you're asking Brad about certain things, it's like, well, there's no information on that at the moment, or no studies done. And I guess in the later years, there's been studies done on like somewhat technique, but also mind muscle connection and those sort of elements within programming. And that's always been a old school bodybuilding kind of thought, is like mind muscle connection matters.
Sure. I think where bodybuilders have fallen down, though, is that you'll hear some bodybuilders that will tell you the weight doesn't matter. And right. I hate that phrase. I loathe it. Like, loathe is such an accurate description of that terminology, because as you and I know, mechanical tension is always going to be the leading drive force of hypertrophy. So sure, our muscles don't know if a piece of resistance is coming from a cable or a shopping bag, but our body does know that one is heavier than the other, and it will then recruit muscle fibers in suit basically to the maximum it needs to do that work. And if we aren't doing work to force an adaptive response, we aren't going to get any adaptation occurring. So the weight that you do use certainly does matter. So that's just something that I have such a pet hate when I hear that phrase.
Yeah, I think it needs, like, it's more nuanced than the weight doesn't matter. You need to have that, so long as you're working to the degree of like relative intensity and you're actually working hard. It's not just because obviously you're not going to grow massive legs running a marathon. It's just that it's a lot of volume, but it's not a high enough intensity of any type. So I think that's really great. And actually something you've become known for, you already mentioned logbooking. I don't know if you'd like to talk more on that, kind of whether or not you always logbooked and advice for others.
Yes, so I initially, even from the age of 12, I was told to have a logbook. I was told to record everything I did in the sessions. And when we would come back into the gym, Keith, my coach at the time, would look at what I did on a previous session, and then he would just jot down on a piece of paper, on next to it on a piece of paper and a pencil, and say, right, this is what we're hitting today, provided that we can maintain perfect form. And then we'd be like, right, let's nail those. Let's get this in the logbook. And then we'd come back in again. They'd be like, right, this is what we're striving for today. And then over the maybe like however long a period of time it was, we've put 20, 30 kilos on a lift. And that additional 30 kilos, provided we're in a caloric surplus, has then brought about huge changes in musculature. Mm-hmm. So if you aren't making steps forward in the loads that you're lifting, you really cannot expect to make marked changes to your physique. I mean, when we think about the first time we start training, and let's say the very first time ever, in that first 6 month period, how quickly we step forward in our lifts is massive. It's absolutely huge. And then that's really what drives the changes in our physique, because again, we're creating huge mechanical tension that our body hasn't been exposed to. But at that point, it becomes harder to keep increasing our lifts unless we're being mindful of what we're trying to achieve in every session. So every single session that I go into, I know exactly what I want from that session. The hard part is ensuring that you have controlled every kind of element that could negatively impact your recovery that will then cause a detriment in your performance. That's the hard part. Have I had perfect sleep? Have I had perfect hydration? Has my nutrition been excellent? Have I managed my stress? I mean, controlling your environment is difficult. And that will then be a big factor into how well you're able to progress your lifts. Like over the years, I've become very, very efficient at controlling my environment.
Mm-hmm.
I know exactly how to go about those things, even to the extent now where I'm really on autopilot in regards to my bodybuilding, because I never miss meals. I never undersleep. I'm always hydrated. I never miss my vitamins. Like stress, sure, it's creeping in now. I'm trying to do things more from a business perspective. But let's say I have a competition coming up. I will delegate and I will drop all of that stress off me immediately, because I know how important that is to try to minimize the impacts that that's going to have on my recovery capabilities.
I think what you said there is so important. It's something I've certainly, especially as there's been more information coming out about sleep and everything. And
Sure.
like, I think Matthew Walker, Why We Sleep, kind of talking about how like people are saying 6 hours of sleep is like for the week or whatever. And it's like, well, actually you're kind of asking for an early deathbed if you end up getting less than 6 hours sleep. And so I love, it's understated.
Those motivational speeches made me laugh. I do find them quite motivating, but the idea of like you only need 4 hours to get what you need to do done. It's like, no, that's crazy. I think that you would be a much more efficient person if you actually prioritized your sleep. But then I suppose our physique goals are somewhat different, maybe to like absolute business goals, because I think when you hear those kind of motivational speakers, they are usually kind of focusing more on career and business goals. Whereas you would never really hear an athlete talking in that manner.
No, yeah, completely. Something actually I wanted to touch on, you talked about logbooking and progressive overload. What is your kind of, I guess, main way of progressive overloading for hypertrophy? People hear about kind of double progression, triple progression, or adding sets like Mike has kind of popularized a bit, or adding load, adding reps. What's your kind of favorite way of doing that?
So my issue with adding sets is that volume is not an infinitely progressible tool. So, and at some point we will reach an upper limit in terms of our volume that will then take away from our ability to progress our lifts. So we have to find a balance in terms of obviously the volume that we can work at without then diminishing returns in our loading that we're trying to achieve. So like I will work usually, let's say, I'll take quads for an example. I'll try and work at around 10 to 12 working sets for quads a week. That will kind of be me at the maximum I can recover from without it taking away from the loading that I'm trying to do. So my logbook will feed back to me once I'm working at too much volume. So let's say I could do 15, 16 sets. Sure, it's never going to be an issue. But I will then go back in to do my main leg session and my lifts will be down. So then I immediately know that 15 to 16 sets is a detriment. So sure, I've added more total work, but it's not an infinitely progressible tool because I've regressed in the mechanical tension in the moment that I'm able to elicit. And that is not a good move. So you never want to, in my opinion, compromise your maximal loading for more work. And I don't know what the literature says on that. I don't think I've seen any literature on that specifically, but I mean, anecdotally, I've seen that with a lot of clients and a lot of individuals, that then the strongest bodybuilders are always the most muscular. So then they are certainly not training beyond their recovery capabilities that then lower their loading. So let's say I'm working in my 10 to 12 sets. I won't necessarily go in with the idea of thinking I'm going to definitely just progress load or definitely progress reps. On maybe on a certain day, I might take more load and more reps, but I will always generally micro load. So I'll always be thinking just 1.25 kilos here, 1.25 kilos there, and I might steal a rep as well. So then if I go in and all of a sudden over like the space of 6 to 8 weeks, I've put 10 kilos on a lift and I've managed to create 2 or 3 reps on that lift as well. That's then a very different looking lift to it was 8 weeks ago. And that body part is going to look different. And then let's say I've managed to do that across all my 10 to 11 sets that I do for the week. That's just an incredible run. Like that's a dream run. And that's what I'm trying to create in every run that I do, until I create a level of fatigue that I then need to offset by then moving back to maybe 4 to 5 sets for a week. I then train at 4 to 5 sets, I recuperate, and then ready to go again for another 8 to 10 weeks at the maximum work that I can do. And then I'll just pound away at my logbook again. And that's basically how I go.
And obviously, I guess when you're, like you described, when you're more novice, your progression's just like ridiculous. And now you're micro loading. Are you finding you ever like repeat performance week on week because you're at a level of advancement where you can't take that?
Sure.
And I guess this is where the technique is really key, because people end up destroying technique for load.
If we then run into a period where it's just going to be maintaining performance, we then, in my situation, I'll then be questioning, okay, do I need to increase my caloric intake? Do I need to potentially increase the drugs that I'm using? If it's then a no to both of those, and I'm not going to be able to squeeze out any more lift progressions, I then might consider alternating that exercise to something else and bringing about a novel stimulus from that new movement. So that could even then just be the alteration between a lying hamstring curl to a seated hamstring curl. So we're still looking at isolating the hamstrings, but I know that that change in stimulus is going to then usually step us forward in musculature again. And then I might max out that seated hamstring curl, and then I might move to like a lying dumbbell hamstring curl. And then once maybe I've moved 2 exercises away, I will then come back to the lying hamstring curl that I initially stalled. I'll look back at my logbook and look where I left that. And I think to myself, okay, by the end of this run, I need to be beyond that. Mm-hmm. I'll just go back to work on that again. So then immediately there, across 3 movements, I've maybe given 8 weeks plus a deload. So that's 12, 24, 36. That's 36 weeks worth of work on the isolation work. And then I'm back on the lying hamstring curl again. And if I can keep moving forward in that manner, which I certainly am, it's going to reflect in my hamstring mass.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, I really like that. And everyone's been there where a lift just becomes stale, where it's not really giving you anything, and if anything, it just feels like it's almost beating you up and you're not getting anywhere with it.
Sure. So as soon as you reset that as well, like neurologically, it feels like a weight that's been taken off your shoulders, and you're able to get usually better connection again with the muscle, and then you kind of start that process again, and that tends to work very well.
And you touched on actually, well, I guess we're kind of talking a bit about variation, but exercise selection is, how do you go about selecting exercises? And I guess to give special credit to like the snatch grip deadlift, that's currently become fairly popular. It seems to have come popular recently. I don't know if it's probably something you've been doing a long time, but I'd love to hear about your kind of thoughts on exercise selection.
So again, in regards to what I said about like training programming, nutritional programming, don't be married to an exercise. I think that I was married to exercises for quite a long period of time. So I would sometimes think that the squat was a must-do exercise, or the conventional deadlift, or the flat barbell bench press are must-do exercises. And I think that quite a lot of people will fall into that fallacy, and it's incorrect. We don't need to perform movements that don't kind of benefit us in terms of our structure. So if you are a squatter and you cannot effectively load your quads, like me, then the barbell squat is going to be a waste of neurological investment that you're better off spending on a hack squat or a leg press. Like, there really is no kudos to being a great squatter if your goal is to build great legs. So you need to prioritize what the training goal is. And that's where a lot of people are going to fall down. So my exercise selection is just one that's based around results. So I'm going to look at the results that certain movements are yielding. And if I feel that I'm getting fantastic response, then I run with them. If I feel like they're really not seeing masses of improvement, then they won't be things that I use. Like open chain exercises are ones where people are potentially going to struggle because they're more of a skill. And being good at that skill is difficult. It's hard to become autonomous. It's hard to ensure that you're loading the correct muscles. Whereas closed chain movements are going to be very, very simple to bring about hypertrophy.
Cool. Yeah, I think the statement of you don't like not being married to anything, like any one approach or one exercise. And I think everyone's almost been there, especially as powerlifting became more popular. Everyone's kind of squat, bench, deadlift, got to do all of those three, which I think kind of took away from bodybuilding a little bit. And we touched, I don't know, we haven't really talked about it in terms of like progressing, loading and reps. Do you have like a rep range that you focus on for hypertrophy, or is there any kind of areas you avoid?
Not anymore. If I'm honest, like previously I would have been like, okay, there's a hypertrophy rep range. But again, like if you have limitations in regards to rep ranges that you can work in, so let's say, for example, that your joints aren't going to allow for 6 to 7 rep work, don't work in 6 to 7 rep work. If your fitness capabilities don't allow you to effectively create muscular failure at 20 rep work, for that period of time, whilst you have that as a limiting factor, don't necessarily rely on 20 rep work to step forward. So I like the idea of progressing my lifts across a multitude of rep ranges. So like my training will typically look like I have a load set and then what I term as a back off set. So my loading sets will be in there at the 5 to 9 rep range, provided that individual can safely work there. And then my back off sets will be kind of 10 to 15 reps. And then I'll then have a third rep range that I work in that will then be 20 to 30 reps. And then in a given session, on every body part, there will be sets to failure across all 3 of those rep ranges. Mm-hmm. Now, let's say an individual does have fitness issues. That's okay, because we haven't then relied on 20 to 30 rep work to induce hypertrophy. We've done loading sets, we've done back off sets, and then we're working towards improving their fitness by incorporating the 20 to 30 rep work. And if they're able to progress their lifts and if they're able to dig in sets, their fitness is going to get better. And it's only going to be a short period of time until they're then actually reaching muscular failure in that rep range. Like, as you know, like we know that muscular failure, even in those higher rep ranges, is going to recruit maximal amounts of muscle fibers. We're going to reach that point where our body will grab onto everything it can, provided it's true muscular failure. So there's certainly no harm in working across all rep ranges. Mm-hmm. The only thing that I would typically avoid as a bodybuilder is just lifting really, really heavy. Just lifting singles, doubles, trebles. Sure, they're going to recruit everything you have, but the amount of total work that would need to be done to kind of allow you to step forward is going to be a lot. And then that neurological investment is not worth it at all.
The kind of, I guess it's this, to talk about Mike Israel again, the stimulus to fatigue ratio, something he's talked about again. He's putting words to things we know, and it's kind of giving you...
Stimulus to fatigue ratio is beautiful. That's perfect. I've not heard that one. That's nice. I like it.
And actually, I guess, because you talked about kind of taking things to failure, and this is something that has become, I guess, there's some people that really like taking things to failure, and obviously Eric Helms has done a lot of work with RPEs and leaving some reps in reserve and things. And what's your perspective there? Obviously, you take things to failure, kind of, I'd love to hear your kind of, what's your rationale?
Like, this is probably going to be the only place in my training where I probably do have a bias.
Right.
Because I just love training to failure. Like, I don't want to leave a rep in reserve. I want to fucking go there, because that's probably the most fun part of my day right there in that moment. The instances where I might have someone leave something in reserve, it could be from a safety perspective if we're trying to accumulate a certain amount of volume. And if they take those sets all the way there and mechanically they start to break down, they're not going to be able to accumulate the volume that we might want to do. So then leaving maybe an RPE of like 8 out of 10 set 1, 9 out of 10 set 2, 10 out of 10 set 3 might be a really great way to go about it, as opposed to 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10, because it's hard to do. The way that I program in regards to training more on the lower end of volume, that's because the difficulty of the sets that I do are 10 out of 10. So like when I say that I do 10 sets of quads a week, someone might think that that number is quite low, but that's 10 out of 10. That's 10 sets that are at 10 out of 10 RPE. And then when you consider that, that's then a bit of a game changer. Because sure, I could do 20 sets at like maybe 7 or 8 out of 10, and I could probably recover from that as well. But what would be interesting for me, and I actually don't know the answer, is what would yield more progression. Would 10 to 11 sets out of 10 be more optimal compared to 15 to 20 sets leaving reps in reserve? I don't know. I don't know the answer. I couldn't tell you. I'm not sure if there's been literature done on someone that's as strong as me.
No way.
So from a scientific perspective, I couldn't give you an answer either way. So then what it's maybe going to come down to is preference. And then obviously in that situation, my preference is to go to failure. Like, I'd be intrigued to know what kind of Eric's perspective on that would be, because I actually don't know.
Right.
I don't know what he would say. It would be an interesting one, but it's not one that I'm actually going to try, because I love training the way I do.
Yeah. Well, I guess what was it even with Eric's muscle and strength pyramids, like adherence is his like number one. So it's like if you're not going to enjoy it, you're not going to adhere to it.
Absolutely. I mean, adherence is the be all and end all, really.
And something actually, I guess it's related to this completely, is I think I heard you coin the term pivotal reps.
Sure.
Is that kind of linked to this?
So the idea of pivotal reps is that, let's say we take a muscle to failure, and then in a rest pause fashion, we only rest 15 seconds, and then we take that same weight to failure again. Now, we know that when we've taken the first set to failure, it was only those last few reps that maybe grabbed every muscle fiber we have. So then after that short rest period, if we were to go again, we know then that we're going to perform 3 to 4 reps that are going to be what we could say pivotal reps. They're going to be reps that challenge every muscle fiber we have. So if we're in a position where our recovery is just incredible, where we're flying and we're making such good progress, we could then insert smartly pivotal reps onto 2 or 3 sets, which then could step us forward even more. So they're not adding full sets in terms of volume, but they are adding more failure points to our session, and they're failure points that are solely prioritizing every muscle fiber being grabbed. So that's why I call back, these are the pivotal reps. These are the ones that matter. Okay. The thing is that, and what I'm trying to explain to people is that you can't use these training techniques all the time. You can't expect to recover from that kind of work all the time. Like, I wouldn't use that kind of technique in a caloric deficit. I wouldn't kind of use that technique in a period where my anabolics are low. Like, those would be in a kind of a window of opportunity where everything is just amazing. And I think to myself, I can eke out a bit more here. Whether the majority of people would even need a stimulus like that, it's hard to say. Because, like, let's say we take a 10 rep hack squat to absolute failure, something that was just fucking crazy, 10 out of 10 RPE, right? You wrapped it, and then you took 15 seconds, and then you tried to grind out another 2 or 3 reps. Like, that is really, really, really demanding work. Most people kind of mentally aren't even going to be able to do it. But there are individuals that are, and that have made progress because of that. And I feel that in those individuals is a more useful tool than increasing our number of sets like maybe Mike would do.
Right.
So I would rather use pivotal reps than increase a whole set.
Yeah, I think especially for someone like yourself, there's just never going to be a study on that population. There's never going to be looking at. So when these rationales come out that you've kind of coined there, I think you can't really say no or kind of, and you can say yes, I guess, because obviously you're progressing. So something's obviously working there.
I think that one of the things that we all have a very good understanding of is that our recovery capabilities are our limiting factors to everything.
Yeah.
And this is what is important to try to get most people to understand, is that they need to know where their energy balance is, and they need to know what volume they can work at. And once they have those kind of things in their mind, their ability to manipulate those numbers up and down is what's going to bring about a great physique. But the problem is that, like, even on my log today, someone said to me on my site, like, I'm trying to use the diet app to try to work out what my macros are. And to us, that's a very simple thing. It's like, well, just track your food for 2 or 3 days. You then know what your caloric intake is to maintain your body weight. Let's go straight in at 1 gram per pound of protein. Whatever you have left calorie-wise, divide up between fats and carbs based on preference. Like, that is so simple, but it's quite difficult to get kind of the majority of people to understand how to even go about determining their energy balance. Mm-hmm. So then when they can't determine that, how can we get them to understand their recovery capabilities? Mm-hmm. So this is kind of what it all boils down to. And I was in Ireland this weekend, and that was what my seminar was on, was just understanding your recovery capabilities, because I think it's just one of the most important things to try to make progress.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good point. And actually, to talk a bit more about recovery, is there any are there things you're maybe for yourself and even clients, are there things you're monitoring kind of to try and get an awareness of that?
So I don't, with my clients, monitor things like heart rate variability. They're not things that I pay attention to really, because for the level of clientele that I'm coaching, if some of them come back to me and they're coming back with their heart rates being maybe a little bit over, and I tell them, rest today, don't train today. Let's say they're 4 weeks out from a show, they're going to turn around and tell me to fuck off. In short, I think that those are useful tools to give maybe the mass population some kind of feedback to understand how they can monitor their own recovery capabilities. But with the clients that I work with, most of the time I'm using their logbook as their feedback tool. That's for me, is telling me everything, because they get on a run where their lifts are flying, and all of a sudden they slow down or they regress. As soon as they get a lift regression, that's a big red flag. That's like, okay, something's wrong. Let's listen to this. And until we get to that moment, let's keep pushing. Let's keep pushing. But obviously what we're striving for is extreme and incredible levels of performance. Now, I suppose you could argue that you might rather deload before you reach that point, to try to keep moving forward. I mean, it's a great argument, but it's not one that I use. I with myself and with Corin and all the pros that I work with, we push right to the limit. And then we listen to that logbook. We listen to the kind of the communication in the terms of when my guys or girls turn around to me and go, Jordan, I'm fucked. Yeah. And I know that they're fucked. Like, because they don't say that to me unless they get to this point. Corin actually had a funny chat on one of our sessions the other day that was filmed. And then basically we have a scale of like, are you fucked or are you proper fucked? And that's basically how we decide our recovery capabilities. It sounds like such a meathead thing to say. And it is, and I love it, because there are some aspects where we will just resort back to meathead behavior, because sometimes it takes that to really get to where you want to be. So obviously listen to your body, but just let your logbook be your biggest feedback tool.
Yeah, I really like that perspective. We don't track like heart rate variability and these sort of tools right now. Like you said, I think there's free ways to gather that sort of data from your clients.
Sure.
I literally just interviewed someone recently and they talked about like session RPEs. So out of 10, how hard was a session? I guess your fucked measurement is just a different way of suggesting the same sort of thing.
Basically, yeah.
And we spoke a little bit about calories there, and sure. I'd love to dig into like nutritional perspectives for gaining muscle, maybe size of surplus, gaining rate, what kind of you do there.
Okay, so with myself, some of my own nutritional setups more evolve around my digestion. So for me, a nutrient timing approach allows me to better utilize my food. Like I've felt that in the way that my performance and the way that that's then reflected in my physique has come about. So if I was to spread my kind of macros evenly through the day, if I have carbohydrates in meal one, possibly because I'm maybe not as well hydrated, or that I'm just not like as awake, or whatever factor is influencing that, my digestion of carbohydrates in that moment is not great. So I just remove carbohydrates from that meal. And then if I have carbohydrates in the meal before I train, I feel sluggish or bloated during the training session. So again, I don't have carbohydrates in that meal. Like if they've digested well with me, I would have them there, because I don't really care where they come in the day. Mm-hmm. I don't really feel that you're going to get much difference if you place your carbohydrates before or after the workout. But just from that perfect digestion, if I have those low carbohydrate meals, they feel great for me. And then as soon as I finish my training session, I feel like I'm able to digest carbohydrates better. And that's not for lack of trying either. So that's certainly not a bias. Like I have periods where I'm like, let's try and reintroduce it again because now my digestion might be better. And then it just isn't. So I always have to end up reverting back to the kind of the way that works for me. With my clients, I base it a lot around their schedule, where they can fit certain meals in, where they feel happiest eating certain meals. Again, obviously, adherence being key. From a nutritional perspective, I would say adherence is even more important than training.
Right.
Like if you go in and you do some kind of training, you're going to get results. If your adherence to your diet is poor, really you could see very little to no progress at all, especially from like a fat loss perspective. Like we're really going to see nothing. So placing foods and certain food types that just allow for that adherence is kind of just the goal. So that just comes down to communication and just understanding their needs and then making sure that their needs are workable within what we're trying to achieve.
And then in terms of, obviously you talked about like 1 gram per pound of protein. Is that how you and then setting fats and carbohydrates preference, is that how you generally go about it?
I would say so, yeah. Like I don't feel like it needs to be any more complicated than that. Like I feel that approach gets superb results. I don't know whether you feel differently. What's your stance?
So personally, I think I agree absolutely. You can get fantastic results. I don't think there's any evidence, strong evidence to suggest, like there's no studies on it. I have a preference towards higher carbs and lower fats, just because carbohydrates are our main fuel for recovery, for training. So that tends to be my perspective. But again, if preference is not that, I wouldn't go that route.
Like that's certainly where all of my diets end up looking.
Right.
It always pans out that way. But if for some reason they were just like, I really love fats in that meal, I really feel better on fats in that meal, I'm going to give them fats. Yeah. So it's just understanding, again, like basically what it falls back to is energy balance. And then obviously within food selection, I'm always going to prioritize nutrient dense choices. I like Lane Norton, so I'm never going to have a dig at him. He's a much smarter chap than me, and he's not someone that I fancy kind of having any kind of disagreement with, because he'll pull me apart all over the places. But I don't like the idea of giving my clients gummy worms or whatever he posted the other day.
Right.
I feel like we can, of course, I totally agree with him that it's not going to impact in regards to energy balance. But what we could be doing in its place is making a smarter choice that could proactively influence recovery. Something that is going to be maybe higher in micronutrients or have a higher anti-inflammatory effect. So although, sure, we could eat gummy bears and lose fat, that isn't going to be the ideal choice that I would have for my clients with the goals that we're trying to achieve.
Cool. Yeah, I think I was going to ask about kind of food composition, I guess. So that's really interesting to hear that. And in regards to the surplus or rate of gain, do you have any kind of goals for that, or do you look at anything to establish it?
It's very person dependent. So if I creep someone's calories up and then I'm really not impressed by the way their composition changes, I'm going to have to be a lot more patient. Because what this really tells me is that individual potentially is a non-responder to the training, or maybe just doesn't train as hard as I was hoped that they would train. So then you have to just be incredibly patient at the rate at which you feed them.
Right.
Whereas you'll then have some individuals that will just utilize their food so effectively. James Hollingshead is an incredible example of this. You start to feed him in an off season, and because James is an absolute animal, he will push up to 280, 290, and he will still be lean because he trains so hard. So everything that you give him, he's clearly just utilizing efficiently. Sure, there's some genetic component there, which is allowing him to build muscle at a certain rate relative to fat. I understand that there is a massive genetic component there, but equally, James is one of the hardest working trainers I've ever come across. And that then makes it not so much a coincidence. There's certainly a correlation to what's going on there. So then it just comes down to learning how people change and then manipulating accordingly.
I love that. And I think from what I've taken away from you, at least today, is being open-minded, individualization, preference, adherence, like these big things. I think a lot of people jump, like there's been a meme recently where people are jumping to the top of the stairs and they're missing all the middle. And these are a lot of the things people should be focusing on within the middle rather than jumping ahead to volume 100%. Or intensity or whatever it might be.
Yeah, for sure. And then we can even come down to like looking at supplementation as well. Like we sell supplements, but we would never encourage someone to buy our supplements if they're not in the position to kind of benefit from them. Like you do not need intra-workout carbohydrates or intra-workout amino acids or even necessarily a pre-workout if you haven't been able to master your nutrition. Like, and that's coming from someone that's trying to make a business from selling those things.
I love that.
I would much prefer that you just saved your money for a decent bit of salmon and you had a coffee before you trained. And then you just learn that the better you adhere and the better you, I tell my clients to just tick boxes. Yeah. I'm like, be so perfect and be so analytical in what you do that tick all the little boxes. And once you've ticked all those boxes, we then get down to the kind of the minutia that might be nutrient timing, that might be intra-workout nutrition. And then those are the things that are going to kind of take you that last 5%. But until we get to that point, we don't want to miss out the stairs in the middle, like you just said.
Fantastic. And as a final question I'm going to get to you is, in terms of like, I guess the last few years or months even, what are the biggest things that maybe you've changed your mind on or changed your perspective on? And if there is nothing, then there's nothing, but I'd be interested in that.
So I would say the biggest thing for me in the last few months maybe hasn't been a change in the way that I view nutrition or training. I think the biggest change for me is just becoming more aware of self-development. And I think that as a trainer, if you want to become a better trainer, you need to constantly be able to display empathy and to be able to communicate and show passion in what you do. And I think that if you're someone that maybe struggles with those things, if you look to improve your self-development, if you're able to reflect on what you're doing in a more efficient manner, that is going to step you forward a lot. And I would say in the last 6 months, that has been my focus in the last 6 months hasn't been on improving my nutritional knowledge or my training knowledge. I'm not actually that up to scratch right now on any of the recent literature because my kind of focus, aside from watching more rugby recently, which has actually been really fun, has been just focusing on self-development and just focusing on listening and reading certain things that are going to allow me to be more reflective, which allow me to be a better person, which then allow me to it's such a overused phrase, but to serve people better.
Yeah.
And I think that once you get yourself into that position, you're going to be happier and your clients are going to be happier.
I completely agree. I think this comes down to like the qualities of a coach. And I think those are the top priority before any of the other things. If you could have all the knowledge, all the experience, but if you can't actually help people because you can't relate to them or you can't communicate effectively, you're going to be nowhere.
Absolutely.
Cool. So I think that's everything I've wanted to cover today. I think we might have to drag you back on if you would, Jordan, but I think
anytime. It would be an absolute pleasure.
Awesome.
I tell you what, get me back in on a discussion where you have Mike on as well, and then we could bat around some training volume discussions, and that would be awesome.
Hey, if you're suggesting it, I'm not going to say no.
I love to learn from him as well, so it would be kind of a borderline discussion, let's have a little mini lecture with Mike and see how much he can teach us.
Cool. Yeah, we can. That can be a bit of a cliffhanger, but I also want to let people know where, if they want to reach out to you or find out more of your stuff, you talked about the member site and everything, where's the best place?
So Corin and I run trainbyjp.com, which is our members site. We're at 5,000 members, which hopefully kind of instills some faith that if 5,000 people are prepared to invest in the site, that we have some fairly decent stuff on there. So if you are interested in bodybuilding, I can confidently say that the site will help you. I don't necessarily think that if you're kind of like an everyday kind of type population person that just wants to improve their health or just improve their well-being or their look, it's probably not going to be the best site for you. It is quite bodybuilding focused. So if your focus is bodybuilding, you're going to enjoy it. And then once you're on that site, you can then reach the rest of the stuff we do. You can reach us to contact us in regards to coaching and whatnot.
Fantastic. And I'll recommend, if people aren't willing yet to invest in that, at least follow Jordan over on Instagram, always putting up inspirational lifts that make you feel like you don't lift anything. So it's always, and great form. So it's fantastic to see. Cool. Thank you guys for watching and listening in. Thank you, Jordan, for being on, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys.